I welcome you all to today's lesson, which is in fact lecture number 22 of the course Linguistics 2, English 504. Now, as you can see in the first slide, we have some words written, role of linguistics in literary interpretation. Now, as you remember, in the last few lessons we were talking about the stylistics and the role of stylistics, what stylistics is and what is basically the function of stylistics and how we use stylistics in interpreting the literary text, how we use language in interpreting the literary text. Now, before we go on to what role linguistics is playing in the literary interpretations, let's have a glimpse of what we did in the last lesson. Now, style as a set of individual and collected characteristics. We defined style. What is basically style, first of all? It's a set of individual and collected characteristics because it operates on the individual basis as well as the collected basis, and it takes into consideration different features or different factors which can make it easy for us to interpret the literary text. Almost all writers have their individuality, and we said that all the individuals, all the writers, they have a particular style. You can't really mix up all the writers, and you can't really evaluate the writings of different writers on the same scale, because every writer has some devices, some particular devices which can be associated with that writer when the writer uses them in order to create impact of his literary writings, or in order to create emphasis, or in order to create stress in the writings. So every writer has some particular style. Style as a deviation from the norm. We talked basically about some definitions of stylistics, and then we criticized those definitions. We talked about the merits and the demerits of these definitions. The first two definitions we discussed in lecture number 20, and then we moved on to the third deviation, third definition, that was when you take style as a set of individual or collected characteristics, or we said that different writers, they have different styles, and they use particular devices. These linguistic devices, these literary devices, they are associated with them, and they use different techniques. Style is a deviation from the norm, and this was the next basically definition which talked about the style as a deviation from the norm, that when a style deviates from the accepted norms of society or accepted norms of writings, it's called a style. And whenever somebody deviates, whenever somebody changes the style, whenever somebody employs a different technique, you can call it as a style of that writer. But then we said that this definition was not really adequate, because this becomes evident that it's difficult to separate style from the context, because there is no way that we can define a specific norm. When the norms are permanent, when the norms are not to change, only then we can put a definition of style as a deviation from norm, because then the norm has to be rigid. But we discussed in detail what norms are and how they change. So when the norms are likely to change, and when the rules are likely to change, and when also the deviations are likely to change, then we can't say that style is basically deviation from the norm, because norms are not permanent. So no way to know what an accepted norm is, because norms, as people move around, they change their ways, they change their, and likewise when they change their ways of living, they change their communication style, then the accepted norm is no more. The norms are likely to change, and this way deviations, they keep on occurring, and the writers, they keep on deviating from what is there at that very time. So this way deviations also change. So we can't really put a definition of stylistics as it's just a deviation from norm. Then we talked about the next definition, which said that the style is just a set of relations among linguistic entities that are stable in terms of wider spans of text than a sentence. This means that when you have wider spans of text, or when you have longer text, then you see some particular things which are, or particular features which are being repeated, and there is a consistency and there is a repetition of certain devices. So then we say that they are stable. Some entities are stable as far as the large text is concerned, and in a sentence they may not be stable, but when you look at the entities in a text, then we see that even a single sentence possesses style, and one cannot write a single sentence without style. So even a single sentence may have some style. You can't ignore a single sentence and just give the definition of stylistics on the basis of longer texts. That since the entities are consistent or consistently occurring in a longer text, or the entities are being repeated and they are stable in a long text, so stylistics is just present in a long text. No, stylistics is also present in a single sentence. No one can write even a single sentence without style. Every sentence has some style, some way the words have been arranged, some emphasis, some stress, some meaning, underlying meaning of some deep meaning that is there in every sentence. So every sentence has a style. So you can't really associate style with just the longer text. Concept of spans, not so much stylistic as grammatical. So the spans, you can just take them as organized grammatically. When you have long text, then more you're more focused towards the grammar, towards how the long text has been built up. You are not really very focused towards the style. It's more related with linguistic, or more related with grammatical aspect rather than with the stylistic aspect. So this definition also falls short on the criteria that what is basically a stylistic, what is true stylistics. It can't be linked just with a long text, and you can't say that one single sentence doesn't have any style. Then we looked at another definition which said that style is the aggregate of frequencies because it's a result of more than one linguistic items. And since you see so many frequencies, you see so many items being repeated in literary writings, that it becomes almost a style. It becomes almost a peculiarity, or becomes a recognition of that very writer. And then when you use the quantitative analysis and you start counting the number of times a certain entity is used in a paragraph, or it is used in a text, then you are basically going towards the style, or going towards the peculiarity of that text, or going towards the speciality of that text, and you're looking at basically how the writer is using their technique, and how many times the writer is using different different linguistic devices so as to call as a style. But we say that any satisfactory stylistic analysis would be a combination of all the 6 approaches. We can't really associate it really totally with the number of words occurring, because there are certainly other factors which also determine the style of a writer. So what we concluded with was any satisfactory stylistic analysis would be a combination of all the 6 approaches. We discussed 6 different approaches, and we said in the end that any satisfactory analysis has to have all those 6 approaches. It has to talk about the devices, it has to talk about the sentences, it has to talk about the individual words. So when you just include all the 6 approaches in your analysis, you're basically doing your job, and you're basically giving the right kind of analysis of a text. All stylistic analysis is ultimately based on matching of a text against the contextually related norm. So you are also looking at the context, not just the style, not just the words, not just the devices, but you're also looking at the underlying meaning. You're also looking at the context of the related norm, context. You're also matching the text against a contextually related norm. So you're also looking at what is the norm. So when you also you include the norm, you also include the linguistic devices, you also look at individually the sentences. So all these 6 things that we discussed have, they have to be included in a ideal definition of stylistics. Stylistics cannot be really defined only related to just devices or just the longer text. Stylistics is it's a combination of all these things. Now today basically we're going to talk about the role that linguistics is playing in literary interpretation. We said that linguistics is being used in interpreting the literary text, how the language has been used, how writers have played with the words, how the writers have changed their words, how the writers have replaced words with more words, how the writers have arranged the sentences. So they are basically using the language, or they're using the linguistic devices to create impact in their writings. So we'll see what linguistics is doing to the literary writings. Linguistics today offers to the students of style tools of considerable precision for certain purposes. There are such tools which basically are precise. They are helping the writers to be precise. They apply these tools for precision. They apply these tools to create an impact in the sentences and their writings. And these tools are precise. They have a precision. They have an exactness. They help the writer to create the right kind of impact. Linguistics does not provide just theories and techniques. This is what is meant by practically providing devices. It doesn't only give theories, but it gives the ways these theories have to be employed, the ways these techniques have to be employed. It leads to the development and critical maintenance of a sensitive attitude to language. It talks about the development of the sensitive attitude and also the maintenance of sensitive attitude to language, how the language is sensitively applied, how your thought is developed, how the attitude is developed when you are using different linguistic devices. So it talks about the development and the critical maintenance, how you maintain that attitude throughout a text or throughout a writing. You keep that mood. So especially when you are repeating certain devices, you are repeating certain words in a text or in a poem, you're basically trying to maintain an attitude. You're basically trying to create that all environment which the reader is impressed with. So it's basically providing you all those practical techniques which help to maintain, or which help to develop that critical maintenance of sensitive attitude to language. Now some major premises of linguistics which play their roles in the study of style are the nature and importance of addressor-addressee relationship, the interrelationships between linguistic and non-linguistic contexts, the uniqueness of the phenomena of language. So all these are the major themes, you can call them, some of the major areas of linguistics which play their roles in the study of style. When you are studying style, some of the major areas that come into picture, some of the major themes that come into picture, the devices that come into picture are basically the nature and importance of the addresser. Some of the important themes, some of the aspects that you include while studying literary text, or when you are analyzing a literary text, are nature and importance of addresser. Number one, how the addressor-addressee, what is the relationship with them? How an addresser is addressing the addressee, what language the addresser is using. So it is also called the audience adaptation. When an addresser or a poet or a writer, a novel or fiction writer, whenever is writing some poem, some poetry, some novels, some plays, is basically has the audience in mind. So the relationship is the first thing. All the vocabulary, the tone, the mood of that very work, that very writing, that would depend on the relationship between the addresser and the addressee. Second thing, the interrelationship between linguistics and non-linguistic contexts. Again, the second thing is what is the relationship between linguistic terms and the non-linguistic context. Sometimes you have very general themes and you are addressing those general themes using a different language, and sometimes the themes are very technical. Again, you are using different techniques to express those techniques, to express those, to express your thoughts, to compose those writings. So you have to know what is the relationship between a linguistic and a non-linguistic context, where you have to go linguistically, where you have to be technical, where you have to apply which techniques, and where you have to just keep a general text and not employ the linguistic techniques. So the relationship is important, and the writer must know that. The uniqueness of the phenomenal language. Now, where the language is unique, you have to know what is the uniqueness of language, what this language is particularly used for, or what words should be used in particular context, what sentences should be used in particular context. So all that comes into the study of style. So when the major areas, some of the major areas of linguistics which play their role in the study of style are nature and importance of addressee relationship, the interrelationships between linguistic and non-linguistic context, because sometimes the contexts are different and you have to write in a different way, and the uniqueness of the phenomenon of language, how the language is used, and what is basically the speciality of language, and which language should be used in which context. Literary language is not a yardstick to measure all the functions of language. Now here we see a different kind of expression here, that literary language is not basically everything. You can't measure all the functions of language through literary writing or literary language. If you see some literary text, no, you can't say that this is the only role language can play, this is the only role language is playing in any literary writings, that it's just used to beautify, or it's used to stress, or it's used to emphasize on certain things. So that is not only the measuring device or the yardstick to measure all the functions of language. We have so many other functions of language which are beyond the use of literary language, beyond the domain of literary language. Literary language is a device, it's part of the whole phenomena of language. Language of literature is only one of the varieties of language. It is one of the registers. It is a type of language that is being used. The problems of stylistic reconstruction involves all aspects of language: sounds, vocabulary, morphology, syntax, and semantics. Now, stylistic reconstruction, how you are reconstructing style, or how you are making a style, or you are studying the style, that involves different aspects. It involves the aspect of language, like all the aspects of language, like for example sounds. You study the sounds, you also study the vocabulary, you study morphology, you study syntax, the sentences, you study the semantics, how the sentences have been made, how the meaning has been given to those sentences, what are the different meanings of different sentences. Hence stylistics will have the same subdivisions. This way stylistics also has some subdivisions, same kind of subdivisions which you see in the language, like sounds, vocabulary, morphology, syntax, semantics. These are subdivisions of language. So when you are studying style, you look at all these. So now then he says stylistics will have the same subdivisions. When you are studying stylistics, looking at stylistics, it also has the same subdivisions, it also has the same words. Now we see how we use these different subdivisions, or what is the role of these subdivisions in studying a text or analyzing literary language. Now moving on, we see phonostylistics, the first subdivision that we see in stylistics. What is phonostylistics? As you can see from the name, it's a rather self-explanatory term, like phono, talking a little about phonology, about or phonemes, or the sounds. So phonostylistics, stylistics related with sounds, stylistics related with phonemes. Now let's see what it does. Phonostylistics will deal with more or less regular recurrences of specific phonological characteristics and such features as verse length, measured syllabic length, when you measure the syllables, when you see how the syllables have been put in a certain verse, for example. Rhyme, the rhyming scheme, the use of the same sequence of phonemes, the same sounds in a given distribution, normally at the end of each verse. You see the same words occurring, the same sounds occurring at the end of the verse. Normally that is basically the rhyming scheme. Or the assonance. What is assonance? Each verse ending in the same consonant or vowel phoneme. So when you have the same consonant sometimes at the end of each line, that is called assonance. Though they may not be the same consonants, but they are different phonemes. So you can see that these are the poetic devices we usually hear of about the style. When we talk about the style of poets, we usually use these devices like the rhyme or the assonance, or we see the syllabic length. So all these are basically related with the phonostylistics, and when you are dealing with the study of style, you do bring the phonostylistics into picture, and you see how the sounds have been managed and how the sounds have been used in order to create impact, or in order to create the musical effect sometimes, or in order to create the emphasis sometimes, or the poets, they try to create that atmosphere so that the readers are really involved and they feel themselves in that very atmosphere, that very environment where they are experiencing all that is given in the poem or given in the poetry. So what a beautiful way to involve the audience, like when the poet feels it's a sound of music, or it's a sound being repeated, or the same syllables coming at the end. While reading, the poet is really involved with that and starts experiencing or feeling that very scheme of music, scheme of syllables, scheme of the phonemes or the sounds coming in a regular pattern. So that is basically the area of phonemes, or the area of phonostylistics. Now stylistics of sound will also deal with the utilization of onomatopoeia or expressive purpose. Sometimes you use sounds for expression. Sometimes you use sounds to create that expression, like you're putting the sounds of the shrieks or the sounds of person calling each other, people calling each other, or sometimes you create the atmosphere of sadness or the gloomy atmosphere just through sounds, and you feeling that those sounds are coming from inside you. You start feeling the impact of those sounds. So expressive purposes. Sounds will also deal with the expressive purposes. The poets may use the sounds, or the writers may use sounds to create expression, to create that very atmosphere, to create that very impact on the readers. Hence, phonology may throw light on such features as alliteration. Some more features which fall under the domain of phonology, like alliteration, assonance, like rhyme, pararhyme, onomatopoeia, rhythm, and meter. So some of these expressions we are really familiar with when we talk about the analysis of poetry, or when we are critically examining poetry or critically analyzing poetic lines from linguistic point of view. We see these terms, we use these terms, and we see that these techniques are being used in poetry: the alliteration, assonance, rhyme, the pararhyme, the onomatopoeia, rhythm, and meter. Classical prosody could thus be modified. Now when we see this technique, the new techniques, we can really change the classical traditions, we can change the classical methods, and we can put a modification to them, just because now we see that all these techniques are being used, and how we are including these techniques in our analysis of literary writings, and how we see their role, and how we see how powerful impact they can play in any writing. This means that a satisfactory phonology would postulate units to cope with a wide range of contrasts of differing status, carried by stretches of sounds of different lengths. So this expression, what does it mean? Some of the words, they need focus. Satisfactory phonology, a phonology that is accepted to everybody, or the sounds which are familiar to everybody, would postulate units to cope with a wide range of contrasts. There is so much contrast of different status carried by stretches of sounds at different lengths. When you are using sounds, some of the poets are using sounds as stretch, they are using so many sounds. Now, then you need a satisfactory phonology to cope up with that. When the sounds are so much spread in any literary writing, the poet is using sounds at different places and sounds of different lengths are being used, then you do need rules, you do need principles, rules, and you do need a satisfactory phonology, a standardized phonology to cope up with such sounds which have been spread. Now, contrasts of stress, for example, the intonation pattern, you see so much intonation spread in the speech, you see stress at different various places. So there you need rules, you need the phonological rules, proper rules, to see how the intonation pattern has been arranged, or how the poet has weaved all this, these sounds and in a proper pattern. So contrast of stress and intonation pattern are also in the picture. Graphology can be of help because stylistic studies are primarily concerned with the examination of written language. Now here another term that we see is graphology. What is graphology? It can help because stylistic, when in writing, when you see that stylistic studies are primarily concerned with the examination of written language, when we study style of writers, we normally have the written speech in front of us, we have the written text in front of us. That is how we can talk about the style of the writer. So graphology, how the pictures have been created, this new branch which helps us to see how the writing has been organized and how it has been made. Some of the things have been made very vivid and clear, or there is a kind of picture in our mind, and we really experience that we are into that that very environment. So the graphology is a branch which would help us to analyze, which would help us to see the quality of the writing. Writing has its own means of indicating some of the pattern contrasts perceived clearly in the spoken language. Now, moving on to spoken language. What about the spoken language? We see that writing also has a means of indicating some of the pattern contrasts perceived clearly in the spoken language. When we speak, we see some of the contrasts, some of the very regular contrasts. We can perceive them easily when we speak them, when we read those lines, right? So writing has its own means of indicating some pattern contrasts. These contrasts we can experience. The writers, whatever contrast they put, whatever relationships, whatever techniques they are putting, or whatever different repetition pattern they are putting in the writing, we can experience them. We can perceive them easily when we read them, when we put them into oral speech. So we see where we feel that there is a rhythm, or where we feel that there is a balance, the rhyming scheme is correct, or where we see that spoken language, while speaking, we feel that there is a kind of imbalance, or there is a kind of the organization is not really proper. So here, what we mean to say here is that basically the writings can also be experienced by people, or the writings can also be understood or interpreted by the readers when they experience them into spoken form as well. Written language use of the alphabet and of combinations of some of its letters to represent some of the sounds of language use. Its use of punctuation, italicization, capitalization, and so on. Now here, when you see the use of such techniques, such sounds, represent some of the combinations that you see from and, starting from the sentence, start reading from the word and of combinations of some of its letters, how the letters have been combined, and they are representing some of the sounds of the language used. Some of the words, they have been arranged in such a way that they represent the sounds. When you speak those words, you're basically giving out sounds. You are representing sounds through words or sounds through letters sometimes. So this is how we can put that written language into oral experience, or the experience of using them in the oral speech. So it's used, all these words like punctuation, like you have a comma, you put a pause. When you're reading a sentence and there's a comma, there's a very short pause. And when you speak that sentence, at the place of comma, you give a short pause. If you really work, I'll give you example here, if you really work hard, you'll pass. So after hard, there's a very short pause. And in written speech, when you write it, you put a comma after hard. So this way, punctuation can help us to see those contrasts, to see how the writer puts breaks, or the writer puts pauses where the writer wants to put. So these are the written devices, or the device, or the tools which the writer has with him or her, and the writer uses these techniques, uses these tools to create impact, or for different purposes, like to have a pause, or like to put a full stop, the writer has finished the expression, or like capitals. Now when a letter the capital letter is put in the start of the sentence, it is spoken with force. The boy went to the college. The boy went to the college. The T, the first T is capital here. So here the capitalization is, when we speak it, we would speak it a bit loudly. We would speak the a bit loudly, because we want to get the attention of the receiver. So the boy, and you're also moreover giving a speciality to the boy. You are defining that boy. So the boy. So that is how we can experience the impact of the written speech by putting to use in oral shape. Moreover, to deal with features such as stress and intonation, and that is the last point here, that we use stress pattern, we can study them, and we can see the use of these devices when we put them to our oral use. In other words, phonology and graphology not only connect substances to form, they are themselves aspects of form, patterns, which on occasions directly make substance meaningful in a situation. So phonology and graphology, they not only connect substances to form, they not only connect the words, the meaningless words, to create form, but they are themselves aspects of form. Patterns which on occasions directly make substance meaningful in a situation. So here we mean to say that sometimes very minor sounds, they can be used to create impact. One small letter can be used by a poet or by a writer to denote something, to express some sound. One small sound can be used to express the whole idea. So it's not only the words, or it's not only the arrangement. Phonology and graphology, they not only connect the substances to form, but they also focus on the importance of substance. They also focus on the importance of sounds or letters and the words. So this importance, that basically tells us how they are playing a role to portray a writer's feelings. Grammar has dominated the description of form. Grammar is the main thing. It is basically grammar which has dominated the description. When you talk about the form of the sentences, form of language, you talk grammatically. You use grammatical techniques. You analyze it on the scale of grammar. So that grammar is playing the main role when you are analyzing the form, or the way the sentence has been written, or the arrangement of words in a sentence. Now, grammar also deals with such places where choice is to be made between small and limited number of possibilities. So whenever you are making choice between words, grammar It deals with that choice, and sometimes you know that this choice can't be made because it won't be grammatically correct. So grammar plays its role there in helping us to make the right choice. When you're choosing the words, wherever some small choice is required, you do look at grammatical pattern, and you do see, you are careful that it doesn't spoil the grammatical structure. So grammar deals with such places wherever you are linking, wherever some choice is made, you do consider grammar. You do consider whether the choice is being made right, or whether you are choosing the right word to replace another word. Grammar can indicate why sit differs from seated. Now see the examples, some very simple examples here. Grammar can indicate why sit differs from be seated. Sit is a general word. Sit is a general verb. Sit down, or they sit down. Whereas if you say be seated, and here you are giving a respect, you are giving that feel comfortable. Be seated here, normally the expression used is be seated, means that be seated, relax yourself, and relax, be in a very restful position. So be seated, be in a position of sitting. To be from not to be, another comparison. To be can be differentiated from not to be. The snake killed the man from the man killed the snake. The snake again can kill a man, and man can kill a snake, but there is a difference, and the difference is again of a grammar. The snake killed the man from the man killed the snake. A rich man helped a poor man from a poor man was helped by the rich man. An active voice, again the next one is a passive voice sentence. So the grammar can identify that where the subject is and where the object is. A rich man helped the poor. Rich man is a subject here, and the poor man is object. But when you change it and you put poor man in the start, then it becomes a passive voice structure, and that is where the grammar domain starts. So grammar can identify between sentences, between expressions, and can help us to decide what choice is correct and what choice is wrong. But here there is a limitation. The grammar cannot indicate why she had a fear differs from why she had a hope. She had a fear differs from she had a hope. Two different words are being used. Fear being replaced with hope. Now these are two different words contextually. Their meaning is different. So here grammar doesn't explain. Grammar cannot indicate why you're putting fear and fear in one sentence and hope in the another. This is not the domain of grammar, because grammatically both sentences are correct. The choice has been made. The choice fear and hope, choice between fear and hope has been made. But the actual thing is that do they match each other contextually or from the meaning point of view? No, they have a different meaning. So here it's not the role of grammar, it's not the domain of grammar here. Such a work can be done by lexis. Now here you go into the area of lexicology, the words. Theoretical categories are required for formal description of lexis, and when you are defining lexis, again you need theoretical categories. Some theories, they come into this picture, that how you define words and how some words can be replaced by some other words and some words can't be replaced. Two fundamental categories of lexis are collocation and set, and they have been proposed by linguists. So two very fundamental categories, two basic categories of lexis, they are collocation and set. They basically help us and to organize the words, to put them in the right shape and in the right form. Alright, now what next? Stylistics of words, or lexical stylistics, will explore the expressive resources available in the vocabulary of language. Now what is stylistic of words doing? What role is it playing in the analysis? This will explore the expressive resources available in the vocabulary of a language. In the language, vocabulary of a language, it's the stylistic lexical stylistics, which is helping us decide the words, which is exploring the expressive resources, how what resources can be useful, what resources are expressive, what resources can be used to express on different occasions, or to give express the meanings or express the thoughts on different contexts. Is basically the storehouse of lexical stylistics, the storehouse of the words, which would help us. And it's the lexical stylistics that is helping us, or that is giving us the way to find the right words. It will explore the stylistic implications of such phenomena. Also, it will investigate or explore the stylistic implications of such phenomena as word formation, synonymy, ambiguity, or the contrast between vague and precise, abstract and concrete, rare and common terms, foreign words. All these are the techniques. All these are the requirements of writing any text, or producing any writing. The word formation, how the words will be formed, how the synonyms can be used, or the words with the identical meanings can be used, or to the ambiguity, how you want to create ambiguity or give the expression of ambiguity, how you want to contrast, show the difference between vague and precise, or the abstract and the concrete, rare and common terms, or foreign words, where all these things are being used. Wherever you are showing the contrasts, you are basically looking at words. You are using the storehouse of words. You are picking the right words from there, and you are expressing all these emotions. You are giving contrast. You are giving the differences between these words. So wherever you want to express something, you basically fall to words. If you want the words to convey any special meaning or to convey any special expressions, then you have to go to the words. The study of imagery will also occupy a prominent place here. Here you also include imagery, how you create image building, how you use the image building words. Like you use image building words to create images, to create that picture, to make it very clear, and to give a pictorial image to your language, and people feel that they can see that picture. Like Wordsworth wrote, when Wordsworth wrote daffodils, he was using those words which made us think that yes, we are in that atmosphere, and we can see the daffodils in front of us. So here basically the writers, they are using the words, such words which create images in our minds, such words which create a picture in our minds. Like somebody in the class who's very active, and every good or bad news comes from that person, and everything starts from that person. We may even somebody may even call that he's the spark plug of the class. No, what is spark plug? Basically, the job of spark plug in a car or in a motorbike, it basically ignites. You turn on the ignition switch, and basically it's a spark plug which throws a flame towards the petrol, and the motorbike starts, the engine starts. So in order to create that image of something that starts everything, that you can call a person as a spark plug, a person who starts everything, or is very active in the class, or in any class, or in the house even, you have somebody who starts everything. So you may call somebody, if somebody calls a spark plug, so that is an image building word. That image is created in the mind of the reader. So imagery also is important here. Word formation, an important source of particular literary effects. Again, you can create effects through word formation, through changing the words, coining the words, putting new words, taking words from other language sometimes, taking words from other forms. You are basically, what you're doing, you are trying to create that impact, you are trying to create that impression which you have in your mind. Some examples like Lewis Carroll's and James Joyce's portmanteau words, novelists of the stream of consciousness school, and again the expressionistic dramatists, they used to play with words, they used to use special words to create special impact or special effects. Then you have more examples like Elizabethan writers. They were fond of transferring words from one class to another. They used to transform their text. They used to use different words. They would take words from different class and use them in another class. They would use happy malice or foot as verb, fair or pale as nouns, or seldom as an adjective. So all these are given different uses. They are coining these words, they are putting them to different uses. So in order to create effect, in order to create impact, or in order to create some special meaning, they are using different words. They are using words from different classes. They are putting them to different use. They are giving them a different class. In more serious literature, word formation is a source of many more or less startling effects, especially in the ultra-modern poetry. In the modern poetry, we see that word formation is a source of many or more startling effects. Sometimes now, when we read the modern poetry, we see such surprising, shocking use of words. Some words, they have expressed the modern feelings or the modern or the trends of the modern times. Some words, they carry those trends, and some more words which have come from the media sometimes, or which have come from the modern society, they are being used in the writings. So we see such startling or surprising or shocking uses of words in the modern literature or the ultra-modern poetry. Moving on to the stylistics of sentences, how the sentences are being used to create style, or syntactic stylistics we call it. That will express the expressive values of syntax at three superimposed planes. What are these three levels, or three overlapping levels sometimes? Components of the sentence, individual grammatical forms, passages from one word class to another. Number two, sentence structure, word order, negation, etc. How the word order is analyzed, how negation is made by changing the word or changing the words in a sentence, and higher units into which single sentence is combined, like direct, indirect, and free indirect speech. Some more higher complex sentences where the sentences are combined, and where you have the longer text sometimes, where sentences are put into use, and single sentences they combine to create compound sentences. So when we are looking at the stylistic of sentences, we can study it at three levels. We can study it from three aspects. Now, the most effective use of syntactic resources is made by those authors who stay within the boundaries of everyday speech. So the most effective use, how the sentences are put to use, or how the writers are using sentences, the most effective use is with the people who are staying within the boundaries of everyday speech, because they can take words, they can change the words, and they can change the sentences, they can replace the sentences, because everyday speech, everyday life, they're getting so many sentences just because it's used every day. It's used in our everyday life. So they keep on hearing, keep on experiencing so many different kinds of sentences that they can really change them. And in society, you find people who use sentences for in different ways. So from society, people can pick up, the writers can pick up new sentences. So it's very easy for them to exploit these words, to exploit these sentences, and you see a variety of these sentences with these writers. They stay within boundaries but combine independent and dependent major or minor clauses, and expand or contract the attributive elements to either coincide with the reader's expectations or to differ with them. So they are using different entities. They combine the independent and dependent sentences, clauses, the major and minor clauses, the dependent, the subordinating clauses, the coordinating clauses. They are using different clauses, they are putting them together, and they expand them, make them longer, or contract the elements which attribute them, the attributive elements. And why are they doing this? They want to either coincide with the reader's expectation or maybe to differ with them. So in order to coincide, to agree to the readers, or to differ from the readers. They are basically using the clauses, they are basically using different combinations of clauses, different words are being introduced. So just because they are so much exposed to society, they are so much exposed to their readers, they are in the society, they are talking about everyday life. They are talking about everyday life, they are not talking about any special ideal life or idealistic point of view. They are not talking from the idealistic point of view, because that would be a very rare speech. A very common speech would be the one which people use in everyday life. Syntactical effects in literature not only include complexity and recurrence, but also syntactical ambiguity. So there are different expressions like complexity, like recurrence or ambiguity. For different purposes, syntactical effects are used, and these include all these expressions, the expressions of complexity, the expressions of recurrence, and also the ambiguity. Lexical ambiguity recognized in the metaphor and the pun. You see such writings as metaphors, so the uses of metaphor and the pun. You see the ambiguity, lexical ambiguity. The words have been used in an indirect way. The words have been used to in a shape of metaphor or similes, or in the pun you are using words indirectly for this purpose, for creating a pun, for giving a certain meaning or a different meaning, the underlying meaning. So here you are basically you create an ambiguity of words, and if they're taken in their literal sense, it would be really funny or it would be confusing for the reader. So they are not taken as in their literal forms, they are not taken in their literal sense, but basically there is something else underlying, and this comes from the society. This comes from everyday speech. In the drama and the novel, differentiation between dialogue, monologue, and narrative, or between speakers, is commonly made by grammatical means. Again, you have the use of grammatical means in drama, novel, or the plays. In such genres, in such kinds of writings, you have again the use of grammatical techniques, the use of grammatical means in order to create impact in these writings, in order to convey different meanings in these kinds of writings. Now this is done normally with the aid of lexical and graphological features which support and intensify these differences. Again, a mention of some techniques, lexical and graphological features. You are using them to support your ideas, to intensify the differences, to give emphasis to your ideas. Writers can use syntactical incompleteness of the full syntax without punctuation for special effects. Sometimes the writers, they avoid the punctuation. They don't put the punctuation, and when you read it plainly without punctuation, you get a different meaning. You get the meaning of the poet, which may not be the common meaning. So in order to create a syntactical incompleteness means the full syntax is broken, it's not completed without punctuation. For special effects, you don't put punctuation and your structure is not complete. So when you read it plainly without punctuation, you get a different meaning. So this is another technique being used by writers. Psychological implications are also very important. When you're analyzing any text, you also include the psychological implications, like what was the underlying idea, what was in the mind of the writer. So you can't separate the idea from the language, as we discussed earlier. So language is linked with the idea. So you also look at the psychological implications, or the psychological aspect is also brought into picture when you're studying any writing. Psychological considerations can help a literary critic in classifying style exactly and accurately, because this is how we can reach the mind of the writer, the thoughts of the writer. So here basically we understand what is basically style, and we can give the exact interpretation of style. If we really go beyond what is in front of us, we go to the mind of the speaker, mind of the writer. So that is where we get the right picture of what was in the mind of the writer, and we can see what actually the style is what kind of style belongs to that writer. For example, Henry Moria in his book La Psychologie des Styles distinguished 8 fundamental types of style, each corresponding to a certain form of character and temperament. Now see, different types of style, they identify temperament, they identify the character. So style here has been linked with the temperament, linked with the character. Like you see different kinds of temperaments here: weak, delicate, balanced, positive, strong, hybrid, subtle and defective. These different kinds of attitudes can be denoted by different 8 styles. A writer may have a style denoting positive mind, denoting strong personality, denoting, for example, defective, broken or disturbed personality. So different kinds of styles, they can identify, they can really denote, they can give us an idea about the temperament or the behavior of the writer. We can study an author's mind or inner ideas with the help of psychostylistics. A very easy sentence, a very easy expression, like we can go to the mind, we can study the mind and the inner thoughts of the writer with the help of psychostylistics. Is a branch which helps us study the mind, study the inner ideas of the writer. Social stylistics too has a role to play. It studies a literary text from the point of view of the varieties of language. When you see different varieties in the society, when you see different kinds of words, different kinds of dialects being used in the society, we go to social stylistics. When we study them, we call them social style, and coming in under the branch of social stylistics, or they are studied using social stylistics, because you have so many varieties in society, so many different deviations in the society, the language is changing constantly. So how to study these different varieties? You have a field which is called social stylistics. Social stylistics, right. Now, such considerations take us beyond the realm of literature and involves us in the reaction between language use and social and cultural patterns. So what we conclude here is that basically we are beyond the realm of literature, we are away from literature, we are outside literature, and we also include language into that, the use of language, the use of social aspects, the use of cultural patterns, how language is being used in society, how language is being used in certain cultures. We also bring them into picture, we also bring them into consideration. We can then account for notions of style which shift and change in different periods and among different people. Then only we can account for the notions of style, we can talk about the changing styles, we can talk about the different styles which have changed, which have shifted in different periods and among different people. So a mention of history here, involvement of historical linguistics, again involvement of history, how history has affected the style, because as we saw that all the historical movements or the socio-economic, socio-political conditions of any society, they do affect the writings. They do also affect the style of the writers. So when we study the writings of different era, the writings of different periods, different ages, we see that the impact of the conditions in that society that is there on the writings, and that is there on the style of the writers, that is there because they start using words related to those conditions, they start using the themes related to those conditions, they start using the sentences related to those conditions, and that is where the whole language gives us a picture, the whole language gives us a picture about the literature being written in a specific period. The student of style, what he should see, what is your role now? Being the students of style, you have to see language in literature in relation to other functions of language, and has to keep the contextual meaning in mind. It's not only the flowery language, it's not only the linguistic devices, it's also the contextual aspect. You have to go down to the meaning level. See the context, then study the language. The formal meaning of an item, according to Halliday, is its operation in the network of formal relations. So what does Halliday say? What is the formal meaning of an item? It's basically it's operational in the network of formal relations. When you see the network of formal relations, then only you can find the exact meaning of an item. The relationship, so it is when you study the relationship, how the words have been related to each other, how they have been used in relation to each other. It's a network of relations, and in that you can really find out the meaning of any term or exact interpretation of a term or expression. Contextual meaning is the part of a situation, and so has a context, a relationship with that situation. What is context? Basically the situation, the setting of that very period, the setting of that very time. It's part of the situation, so has a context relationship. It has a relationship with the situation. Context is setting, which has a relationship with that situation. Inside the situation you have different contexts. So context has a relationship with the situation, and the contextual meaning of an item is its relation to extra textual features. So how can you find the contextual meaning of an item? It's basically that is taken as in relation to extra textual features. You move out of the text. You are not talking about the textual features. You move out of that, and it's beyond the textual features. It's beyond the apparent meaning of the text. Then only you talk about the context. Now, concluding words for today. Briefly speaking, socio-stylistics is the study of a literary text on the basis of historical and dialectical differences. That is, on the basis of the field of discourse, mode of discourse, and tenor of discourse. Now, what are these three terms? The field of discourse is basically the subject matter. So, socio-stylistics related with the subject matter. Mode of discourse related with dimension in which the linguistic differences they come out from the distinctions between spoken and written discourse. So spoken and written discourse, whatever the differences are there, that is basically the mode of discourse, the dimension. So socio-stylistics also related with those relationships and the distinctions. Tenor, the style of discourse. What is the linguistic style of that discourse? What is the apparent style of discourse? So, socio-stylistics, what is socio-stylistics? It's basically a relationship. It talks about the three different factors, the three different features. It's related with the subject matter, the relationship dimension, which accounts for linguistic differences, and also the style of discourse. Registers are distinguished on these three bases, and a new a sentence here which gives us the idea about registers here. We have studied registers. Now recall what are registers. Registers, the different kinds of languages being used in different professions. So registers are distinguished on these three bases. By code switching and dialect switching as well, writers create literary effects. And now a new technique, the code switching, also helps the writers to create certain effects, and also the dialect switching. Like we had T.S. Eliot using Sanskrit in The Wasteland. The very famous poem, The Wasteland, T.S. Eliot's use of Sanskrit, taking words from Sanskrit. What is T.S. Eliot doing? Is basically code switching. So by code switching, also trying to create that impact that he wants the readers to feel that they are in that very environment. So stylistic studies the psychic, social, linguistics, literary, ideological circumstances of a literary text. The concluding words about stylistics: it studies the psychic, the social, linguistic, literary, ideological circumstances of a literary text. It includes all these factors. It analyzes the text from all these aspects, and then only you can say that it's the right kind of interpretation. Summing up today's class and today's discussion, we say that linguistics leads to the development and critical maintenance of a sensitive attitude to language. Talks about the development and the critical maintenance, how the language is developed, how the mood is developed, how it is maintained, and how the sensitivities are addressed. That is basically linguistics. That the problem of stylistic and reconstruction involves all aspects of language: sounds, vocabulary, morphology, syntax, and semantics. I think the key word here, stylistic problems of stylistic reconstruction, they involve all the different aspects of language. Like sounds, they include vocabulary, they include morphology, they include syntax, and they also include the semantics. Hence, phonology may throw light on such features as alliteration, assonance, rhyme, pararhyme, onomatopoeia, rhythm and meter. And stylistics of words, when we moved on to words, we talked about the words even. The lexical stylistics will explore the expressive resources available in the vocabulary of language, how the words are used to express different feelings, how what is the power of the words, how the power of words can be used to express feelings. Word formation, synonymy, ambiguity, or the contrast between vague and precise, abstract and concrete, rare and common terms, and foreign words, that also comes under the domain of word domain of words, domain of the storehouse of words, which is at the disposal of the writer to use. Word formation, an important source of particular literary facts. More words are used, more words are formed, words are coined in order to create particular literary facts. So this is what is the game of words, how the writers are using the words or playing with the words. Again, we talked about these sentences, that syntactic stylistics will express the expressive values of syntax at three superimposed planes, like components of the sentence, then like sentence structure, and then higher units like the single sentences combined. So at three different levels you are talking about these stylistics of sentences. Now this is all that we had about the use of stylistics, the use of language in analyzing literary texts. We saw how many devices the writers have with them, or what a vast storehouse of devices the writers they enjoy in order to create impact in their writings, in order to create different expressions, in order to express their different feelings. They use language so extensively. So we can say that literature without language is nothing, that literature can have that impact with the use of language, with the use of different words, with the use of different kinds of expressions, with the use of different sentences. So the text also can be analyzed on the basis of the literary text. If it's analyzed without looking at the use of language, or without looking at the effective use of words and sentences, it would be a failed effort. It would not give us the right interpretation of the text. In the coming lessons, again, we'll talk about the larger text. We'll talk about how the discourses are analyzed, or the large texts are analyzed. What is the area of discourse analysis? Again, in this lecture, we further extended the discussion on how the language is used to analyze the literary text. So till the next lecture, it is goodbye from here. Good luck.